Thanks. So no hub discussion at hub conference.
Well, I want to be the whole of Germany actually to be a hub, but you can imagine that's very hard for the federal government to take a position in this space between Frankfurt, Berlin, Munich or Hamburg. I mean, Frankfurt has the financial institutions, Munich has especially the insurances, Hamburg has its financial history, and Berlin actually has almost no financial institutions, but the tech scene. And so actually we just will see which city will make the race. Perhaps it's possible with the opportunity to travel very fast in Germany to make it a big hub with all cities together.
Yeah, we all, I think, would love that. You mentioned Brexit. Do you think Trump will have any effect on more fintechs in Germany or continental Europe?
Well, I'm just coming from Parliament, and then there were some budget debates, and now everyone seems to be somehow affected by Trump. We should not overestimate what's going on there. But on the other hand, uncertainty is always not good for growth, not good for investments. And there is uncertainty in the UK, obviously, about where it goes, if there is any passporting or not, what will be the relationship to the European Union in the future. There's uncertainty in Washington, in the US, what's going on. I just can say one thing. Germany is a very stable environment for investments, for regulation as well. And so I just can, everyone who wants stability is just invited to come to Germany.
Very good. So Lars, what were your personal 3 highlights from the study?
Okay, I think one thing is that for me it was much more difficult than I expected to define what a fintech actually is. So I think that was a really intellectual task here to do to figure that out. And second, I think that wasn't surprising, but I think it's important. I think, as Mr. Spahn said, I think Germany's well on track. So in Europe, we are on the 2nd place in fintech, in the fintech market. And third, I think the potential for fintechs in Germany is huge. And I didn't expect it this way, that in particular banks, I think, are under threat in each and every segment a bank is operating in. And so I think there will be a lot of development to come.
So you mentioned it was hard to define what a fintech is, and I personally find it hard also. But I have one definition what, for me, summarized fintech quite well. And I think the huge difference between a fintech and a bank is that a fintech combines the regulatory and the technology. And what I mean with it, when you talk to SAP, they say, yeah, we can build this great software you can buy for millions or billions, and then we take not one ownership for being compliant in the processes. And banks, they have to be compliant and regulatory approved in their processes, but they don't take the responsibility for developing the software. And that's why my question goes to you. And when I see it, in one startup, we have a Solaris Bank, which more is a tech company. We have FinReach. We are actually doing for more than 100 banks in Germany now a process which is legally enforced, and they taking the responsibility for the process. So did you also look at the software industry when you looked in definition of fintechs, or did you more coming from a business model point of view from the finance sector?
So obviously there's also simple or only technology companies or software companies, but the question is like, would they be a fintech or not? So I mean, coming back to your supposed definition of the regulation and technology, so you would say that N26 was a fintech in the early stages, but then when it grew and got a banking license, it moved out of the segment of being a fintech, apparently.
No. They're developing the technology themselves. That's why they're having both in the core, I think. I don't see a lot of banks developing own technologies in their self, and that's, I think, a big differentiator.
Yeah.
Your view on it?
Well, of course it's very hard to define actually what's a fintech. It's a big bank that is, I mean, there are some banks that are very good in direct banking. Are they a fintech or not? It's just a new company, a fintech. It's a company that is older than 10 years, still a fintech. So you can argue what's the right definition of it. Of course, for this study, we had to find a kind of definition just to make somewhere a difference. But the more cooperation there is, and the more it somehow merges, I think in the end, perhaps it's just one big fintech area, the whole financial system. But for this study, we just try to find a kind of definition.
Okay. Internationally, how do you view Germany? You said Germany against London, or Berlin against London, but like, let's see, outside of Europe, what's your view there? How does Germany position it there?
Well, I was surprised, actually. There was another study these days that France seems to do very surprisingly well in this area, to be honest. I was surprised, at least, perhaps not you. But as I said, I was just in Hong Kong and Tokyo, and I was surprised, actually, that compared with them, we are very well on track. What I found very interesting is that in Hong Kong, I learned a lot about the development in China. And if you see what Alibaba and WeChat is doing there, I mean, that's the biggest fintech worldwide, I would say, what's going on there. And and they can do what they do because there's absolutely no regulation. There's no regulation at all in what they are doing there right now. The Chinese government starts to look at it because, I mean, they are even giving loans through WeChat, through WeChat. Meanwhile, but they are not regulated as a bank or as a financial institution. So they start to look after it now. I didn't realize it before, to be honest, because it's just happening in China, and you just don't experience it here in Europe or the US. But obviously, there's really something going on there in China. That was a surprise or something new for me. But compared to Japan, even compared to, I mean, when I was in Washington and talked to some of the regulatory boards and to my colleagues, from a governmental position, I would say we are really well on track compared to them. They have, in some areas, they have in every state more than 50 different regulations for some financial areas. And so, if we are really able to build up one European fintech market and one common regulation like we do in the payment directives, and to open up the interfaces, for example, we really have the chance to build up a big European hub for it, with, of course, some leading cities. So far it was London, Berlin, and Paris a bit, and Scandinavian cities. But now the question is, what happens with the Brexit? Some are already moving over to Berlin, I know, from some companies. Is it really a big movement? Will it be a big movement or not? I don't know. We will see. But I just can say I would have loved if the UK had remained in the European Union. But now as they are leaving, I just can invite everyone to come over to Berlin.
You mentioned Hong Kong, and when I talked to the Hong Kong FinTech guys, they were telling me about the BAT problem. I never heard about the BAT problem before. It stands for Baidu, Alibaba, and Tencent. In the moment where you start a startup, they just go there with more developers, more money, more reach, saying WeChat, which is a company from Tencent, and then you're gone as a startup, and they own the revenue pools and they own the customer. Aren't you afraid that we now hassle with a lot of making this nice platform? We open up all our banks, PSD2, and then one of these big folks comes with the better technology platform and gets all the revenues?
Of course, there's a risk, but I mean, with China, we have discussions anyway about shadow banking. That's a big issue there right now, and the financial institutions and market in China in general. And if you have something like WeChat and everything that's going on there, and other fintechs too, totally unregulated, I'm not too sure if it is really easy to just take this concept and to bring it to Europe or the US again then. But on the other hand, what I just heard and what is actually the normal way they do it, just let it happen in every area, and sooner or later, when it gets too big, then they start to regulate it. And that seems what the Chinese government is about to do now, when it is really growing fast. They start to regulate it, and now we have to see what's going on there. But I mean, what I just realized once more, it's not totally new. There's so much going on there in China in this area, and here in Europe, actually, you just don't realize it because it's just in China. It's not like Facebook or whatever, which is worldwide. It's just big companies in China with 1 billion people as a market. And then it is hard for us actually just to really know what's going on there.
So we just got an Asian investor who is very interested in technology. Lars, do you have any view on how we as Germans, Europeans, can build this technology in the sense of that it's defendable, as venture capitalists also want to hear it, so that it's making some revenue? So do you see in your studies or your general observation that it went through more technology and less customer acquisition games? Have you any view on the business models?
I don't think that Germany is very much threatened in there. I'm not really a technology person, so I'm an economist. I don't see that there's a threat coming from China. I mean, could be, but maybe we are simply faster in developing technology than the Chinese are doing. So. Or better, but I can't.
I'm not sure if we are faster. Hopefully, we are better.
Yeah. But if you see, you see it in the study, what we had 10 years ago, what we had 5 years ago, and what we have now, and what actually was built up within the last 2 or 3 years here in Germany in the FinTech area, and by the way, in the startup scene in general. Of course, we are not as good as we should be compared to Israel, compared to UK, compared to the United States. But if you take the growth rates of the past years and try to get an idea where we might be if we do the right things, if we build up the right environment, if we help to change the laws where it is necessary, to have the openness in mind, actually. I just had some discussions about digitization with some colleagues in Parliament. We need an open mindset and not just a risk debate. Then we have just a chance to become one of the FinTech hubs in the world. I think the circumstances are very good. There is a good base for it, taking the growth rates of the past years and the idea where we could go. But of course, we need the ecosystem to do it with us, and we need to be open for it, and we need to enforce it as a government. And that is actually what has changed too within the past months, that we really have a focus on it. I would say 18 months ago, there was almost no discussion about it in the government, what's going on there in the FinTech scene, and now we are really focusing on it.
I think that's great, and we all realize, working in the industry, that the government is really taking care of regulation, making it more open, and also the exchange and opening banking infrastructure. So that's great from a legal regulation point of view and finance point of view. What I wanted to point out is, will it be there? Will it be open and everyone? Then everybody can use it. Also, foreign investors can make use of it. So what is the German government doing for accelerating technology growth? Even we're in Berlin, even Berlin is more affordable. I'm having hard times to finding the right developers. We already have 150, but they coming from Ukraine, from Russia. They don't name Max or Thomas. So what is the government doing on that side? If we all agree that banking is changing more to a technology game, which I think a lot of industry will, is there any initiatives you see today which we are doing?
Well, first of all, when it comes to talents, this word Willkommenskultur, you know, the one we discussed in the past 12 months about the refugees, the openness, the warm welcome for refugees. Actually, this Willkommenskultur comes from the debate, how can we be more open, more welcoming for skilled people to come to Germany. And actually, when you take the laws, we have one of the most liberal immigration laws into the labor market in the world. You wouldn't think it, but it is that way. The problem is, how do we deal with it? How do our authorities on a level in Berlin, in Ausländerbehörde, in the authority, how do they deal with it? Or when I'm in the embassy in India, I just tried it. I talked to them and I said, when an Indian engineer is coming to you, trying to go to Germany, how do you deal with it? And they were so shocked by my question that I can imagine how they deal with it. So are we open, are we inviting to those skilled people from all over the world that try to come to Berlin? I mean, we have some, especially in the tech area, that have contracts with 100,000 or 200,000 euros per year payment already the contract in their hands, and then we don't let them in because there might still be something missing, just qualification stuff or so. I mean, this is obviously immigration into the labor market and not into the social welfare system, and we should be more open there, and that is actually what we discuss. And on the other hand, it's about financing. when it comes to seed financing, when it comes to the first series, I think there is the money needed. The good ideas get the money here in Germany, but when it comes to the bigger tickets, 20 million, 50 million, even more, then we have problems. Then foreign money comes in, which is in general no problem. I mean, if it is an open world, then that shouldn't be a problem. But we want to have more money out of Germany in this ticket size as well. So we try to build up, as you might know, a venture debt facility for this to make it more easy to get money when you really need it for growing, when the business model is actually already proved and now you want to grow. We try to build it up. It takes some time because we need to get a deal more or less on it with the European Commission that need an approval because of the state aid rules, but we are working on it, and then we would, after the first steps and the support we have in this area, we would have one tool as well for this growing area.
When it comes to money, maybe one recommendation from someone who's working with it all day. We need actually more money also in the seed phase. I mean, I hear it often that there is money in the seed phase. Yes, there are the first 200K, the first 500K. But when you want to build complex financial infrastructure, plus you need to show traction, it needs to be defendable, and your team needs to be diverse, and you need to be cool and drinking Club Mate all the time, then it doesn't work with 500K. So we started businesses now from the start, from the seed financing, having 4 million in the bank, because we believe only that's really making a change. And so when it comes to a financing strategy, as I think another minister or secretary now defines this hub strategy, why don't giving those hub a certain amount of money who are working with this each day to deploy it faster also in seed financing, because I think governmental spending in those seed funds is very difficult, and maybe Lars can support a little bit on it. Maybe do we have something like a quality score? Do we have something like, have you find something in your study where we can make the displacement of money more easy?
I think in Germany we have a lot of new ways to provide money, and I'm not really sure whether it's really a problem to receive money. I can understand that Germany is maybe not as liquid as the US market, for instance. But on the other hand, if you look at markets like crowd investing, for instance, I think it's also kind of stagnating at some point. And I think you have to ask whether it's a question of, are we lacking the deals, or is it really the money that we are lacking? And so I would leave that open.
Okay.
But I mean, the question is, does it always have to be public money? Yeah. Just one provocative answer to our banks. I mean, we have saved the banks and the whole financial area with billions of taxpayers' money in Europe in the past years. I mean, there could be 4, 5, 10 banks just building up a fund, putting money into it, not just because it's good for them and their business development or their business model, just to give something back to the public. And I don't know, just to put together 200 million, 400 million, just to do something in Frankfurt, Berlin, wherever. Is it always the state, or is it always public money that has to do it? Well, by the way, it's the same for the automotive industry. Yes. We have saved them 2008, 9, 10 with billions of taxpayers' money, and now actually, every now and then I say, besides the Boni debate, you could build up some funds, not just for startups you need for your own development, but to give something back to the public, 50 million, 100 million, 200 million. Why is it always that we have to do it? I mean, we do something, yeah, we do something, and I take that with me, what you just said about this, and we can look over it, but actually I would love to invite the other players in this area as well to do something.
I think that were such a great closing words. Banks invest in startups. I couldn't imagine of something better. I thought just the time got extended. I don't know now what I should do with the extra 3 minutes. But by such a good closing words, I think Jens Spahn and Lars Hornuf, thank you very much for that panel. And if this is the takeaway of today, I think we achieved something. Thank you.